Hello, Daphne here with another video for you. This one is titled, Have You Ever Had Lunch with a Real King and Queen? Many years ago, my father was stationed with the American Embassy in Tripoli and Benghazi, Libya. The reason he was stationed two places is because Libya has two capitals, or at least it did in those days. So lucky me, I got to travel to this interesting country as a young teenager in the early 60s. My father and mother loved Libya. They loved its people, its history, and its culture. Even though my age was young, I took to Libya too. After all, as an American, I was experiencing a whole new culture, whole new surroundings. I mean, after all, Libya is really in the Sahara Desert, and there was sand. You couldn't go very far without seeing sand. And my twin sister and I just had more fun there than you can imagine. We spent our summer outside Benghazi in a little town called Cyrene, a gorgeous town high up on a hill overlooking the Mediterranean. And what a gorgeous spot that was. Anyway, when the king and queen heard that my parents were having their twin daughters for the summer, they invited us to the palace because they wanted to meet the twins. We were so thrilled at this invitation. What a special treat. Now, let me just give you some background about King Idris. He was king of Libya until 1969, when he was thrown out of the country. Actually, he was out of the country at the time when his evil nephew, Muammar Gaddafi, in a coup d'etat, took over Libya. What a sad day that was for the country. From that day on, it was a downward trend. And I am just happy to say that we got to experience it long before that evildoer took over. So on a bright and beautiful summer afternoon, my mother, my father, my twin sister, and I were on our way to the summer palace of King Idris and Queen Fatma. When thinking back on this memorable day, I think once again what an extraordinary experience it was, and how fortunate I was to be able to have lunch in a palace. That was so impressive, let alone the fact that it was with a king and a queen. Prior to our arrival at the palace, my parents had me under very strict instructions. When I met the king and the queen, I was to look them straight in the eye, shake their hand, and curtsy. Well, I am very glad to report that I carried out my royal duties absolutely perfectly. Amazing. Upon arrival, we were escorted through the beautiful palace to the dining room, and I remember my first impression was seeing all the gorgeous flowers in vases lined up down the center of the table. So we were all seated, and our lunch began. It was 11 courses, we were told after we sat down. I thought, oh my goodness, I'm not a very big eater, so how am I ever going to get through 11 courses? But I did. I managed. And then in the middle of eating my chicken, it was very tasty, the king leaned over to me and said, Daphne, how do you like your rabbit? Oh, I almost gagged right on the spot. From that moment on, I had a really hard time taking another bite, but I did, and I was polite and finished. Otherwise, I'm sure my parents would have been very, very upset with me, and I didn't want that. So anyway, we had our wonderful lunch, and after lunch, Queen Fatma invited my mother's sister and I up to her dressing room. Well, I swear her dressing room was as big as most people's bedroom. And when we got there, she asked me to sit down next to her on the bench. in front of the dressing table. On top of that table was a bottle of Joy perfume. I did not know at the time that Joy perfume was one of the most expensive perfumes in all the world. The Queen picked up the bottle, put a little dab on her finger, and then placed that dab of Joy perfume on my wrist. I can tell you, I was just in seventh heaven. For that moment, or I should say moments, with the Queen next to her, so sweetly giving me some of her perfume, I truly felt that I was a princess. Oh, how I loved Queen Fatma. She was just such a wonderful lady. So my parents and I, after being with the Queen, we went to meet King Idris at the stables where he kept I don't know, 40 or 50 Arabian horses. They were gorgeous, every one of them bright white. And I can tell you that stable was so gorgeous, anybody could have lived in it. It was elegant. But anyway, clearly the king was so proud of his horses, and we had an enjoyable time seeing them too. So after that experience, the king wanted to take my twin sister and me on a trip to see where Libyan guerrillas had fought that horrible but very successful German general Edwin Rommel during the Second World War. And many battles took place outside of Benghazi and the nearby town of Tobruk. Clearly, King Idris was very proud of the role that the Libyan guerrillas played in helping the Allies stop Rommel in North Africa for the first time. He was defeated. But it was an interesting experience from another point of view, too. Besides that historical experience, we had a very interesting experience riding in King Idris's limousine. It was surrounded by all the people that recognized his car. And some of them were so close that the car could hardly move at times. And King Idris had a smile on his face, waving to everybody. They were so delighted to see him. And he leaned over to me and encouraged me to wave too. So that was my second time that day, feeling like I was truly a princess. I just loved that day. It was just an incredible experience. And I wish I had written down more of the details. I remember the highlights, but not all those details. So any young person listening to this video, please write down and keep your special experiences so you can read details that will go by the wayside over the years. Anyway, this is not the palace we went to, but this is the King and Queen's Palace in Tripoli. It was enormous, and we drove by it, and it was beautiful, and I loved seeing it. Just loved seeing it, especially after fantasizing about the day we were going to spend in a month or so having lunch with the King and Queen. Over the years, King Idris and Queen Fatma were in exile. The coup took place by their evil nephew while they were on vacation in Greece. But they spent out the last days of their life in Egypt, where I believe they died. Here are the inside of 2 Christmas cards that were sent. These are just 2 of the years of Christmas cards Queen Fatma sent to my parents. And I just thought her messages were so sweet. And I loved the way she signed her name in both English and Arabic. She was a very educated and cultured woman, and a sweet and gentle soul who it was my supreme privilege to meet. My memories of Libya are so fond, and there's so many of them, I can't even describe them all here. Of course, the lunch with the King and Queen was the highlight. But one thing that is sad is that due to the political turmoil in Libya, I will never be able to return to all the places, all the beautiful places in Libya that I so enjoyed all those years ago. And that's a little bit sad for me, but I still have that wonderful memory of lunch at the palace outside of Benghazi. Oh my goodness, was that just the best. So I don't believe that either one of my granddaughters know this story. So I think they'll be surprised to know and hear my experiences about the day that I had lunch with a real queen and king.